Some people pause before speaking. Not long, just enough to notice the space. A breath is taken, then released. The moment is ordinary. A room, a sound, someone waiting. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy. They look as if they are thinking, but they are not searching for words. The words are already there. They simply stay where they are. Conversation keeps moving. Someone else fills the space. A laugh appears. A comment. Life continues. It feels normal. It blends in. Some people stop mid-sentence. Not out of confusion. Not from distraction. They sense the pause. They let it settle. The silence does not ask for attention. It does not disturb the air. It sits quietly, like it belongs there. Faces remain relaxed. No one reacts. The pause is small, almost invisible. Some people notice details instead. The tone of the room, the weight of the moment. They listen more than they speak. They observe how things unfold. A comment could be added. An explanation could follow. But nothing is missing. At least not on the surface. The moment passes cleanly. No friction. No trace. Some people begin to move this way often. Pausing becomes familiar. They choose when to speak. They choose when not to. The choice feels quiet. Almost automatic. They are not withholding. They are not guarding anything. They simply do not rush forward anymore. The world around them stays loud enough. There is no shortage of sound. Others talk easily. Stories keep forming. Some people stay present. They nod. They acknowledge. They are there. Fully. Yet something subtle has shifted. Words are treated with care. Not because they are fragile, but because they cost something. The pause grows slightly longer. Still acceptable. Still unnoticed. Nothing breaks. Nothing ends. Time keeps moving. Some people grow comfortable inside that pause. They learn its shape. It holds no drama, no tension. It feels calm, contained, almost private. The silence does not explain itself. It does not need to. It blends into the rhythm of life. A response is expected, then forgotten. Someone changes the topic. The pause is gone. Only a faint sense remains that something could have been said, but wasn't. And that feels strangely fine. Some people start to answer with less. Not because they forget. Not because they do not care. They just stop adding the extra part. A question comes. They give the simple version. The shortest one. It works. No one asks for more. Some people notice they no longer correct small mistakes. A date said wrong. A detail misplaced. They hear it. They recognize it. And they let it pass. Once they would have stepped in. Gently. Casually. Now, they stay quiet. It feels easier that way. In conversations, they listen until the end. They do not interrupt. They do not jump in with context. They wait. When it is their turn, they keep it light. A few words. Enough to move on. Some people stop telling stories the long way. They cut out the background. They remove the reasons. They arrive at the ending faster. Sometimes they do not even reach the ending. They notice how often explanations are unnecessary. How rarely they change anything. So they simplify. At work. At home. With friends. They answer emails with shorter lines. Messages lose their detail. No emojis. No follow-up thoughts. Just enough to be clear. Some people stop defending their tone. If someone misunderstands, they let it sit. They know how it sounds. They choose not to adjust it. There was a time when they would explain, clarify, rephrase. Now they pause. If the moment passes, it passes. In group settings, they speak later than before. Often last. Sometimes not at all. They watch how the conversation shapes itself. Who takes space? Who fills silence? They do not compete for it anymore. Their presence becomes quieter, but still steady. Some people stop sharing thoughts as they appear. They let them fade. Not every idea needs air. Not every reaction needs sound. They keep more things to themselves. Small reactions. Passing feelings. Nothing dramatic. They notice how often they used to explain themselves without being asked. How quickly they would offer reasons. Now, they wait to see if anyone asks. Most of the time, no one does. And that answers something. Some people stop preparing explanations in advance. They no longer rehearse what they will say. They enter conversations without a plan. If the moment comes, they speak. If it doesn't, they don't. This change is subtle. It grows slowly. There is no clear beginning. Friends might notice shorter responses. Less detail. They might assume tiredness. Or distraction. Some people let those assumptions stand. They do not rush to correct the image. In disagreements, they speak less. They state one thing, then stop. They do not stack arguments. They do not push for agreement. If the other person disagrees, the silence holds. Some people stop explaining their boundaries. They just act on them. They say no without adding a reason. The world keeps turning. They notice something interesting. Most situations continue just fine without their explanations. Meetings end. Plans move forward. Life adjusts. This realization settles quietly. They stop over-answering. Stop filling gaps. If someone is confused, they let that be visible. Confusion does not scare them anymore. Some people stop explaining how they feel. They show it less. Not because they are closed, but because it feels simpler. They choose silence over precision. The shift is not announced. It is lived. And from the outside, it looks like calm. Over time, the moments begin to repeat. Not all at once. Quietly. A chance to speak appears. Then fades. Some people notice this rhythm. They see how often the same thing happens. A thought forms. A pause follows. Silence remains. It is not accidental anymore. The pattern shows itself in small ways. In familiar places. With familiar faces. At first, each pause feels like a single choice. Independent. Unrelated. Later, it feels connected. Some people remember when explaining felt natural. When words flowed without effort. Now, something holds them back. Not force. Not fear. Just a quiet calculation. They sense the energy it takes. The time it requires. They have seen how often explanations land softly. And how often they fall flat. They have watched faces stay the same. Eyes drift. They notice how clarity does not always bring understanding. So they begin to choose differently. The repetition teaches them something. Without speaking it aloud. Each time they stay silent, nothing collapses. Nothing is lost right away. Life continues. This reinforces the habit. Some people start to expect the moment to pass. They no longer lean forward. They sit back inside themselves. The world fills the space easily. Others speak. Others decide. And it works. The pattern deepens. They notice that explaining often meant exposing something. A reason. A feeling. A position. Silence protects that. Not in a dramatic way. In a practical one. It keeps things simple. Some people realize they have been repeating the same explanations for years. The same stories. The same reasons. They know how they sound. They grow tired of hearing themselves. So they stop. They sense that being understood is not always within reach. No matter how carefully they choose words. This realization settles in quietly. The pattern becomes internal. Before speaking, a question appears. Is this needed? Often, the answer is no. The pause comes faster now. Silence arrives almost automatically. They notice fewer corrections. Fewer clarifications. The habit spreads to all areas. They explain less at work. Less with family. Less with friends. Not because they care less. Because they have learned something about effort. Some people see how explanations can invite more questions. More expectations. more responsibility. Silence keeps things lighter. It closes the loop. The pattern is not built on one moment. It is built on many small ones. Moments where words did not help. Moments where silence did. Over time, the choice feels natural. They no longer think about it. The absence of explanation becomes a default. They notice how others respond. Some fill the gaps. Some move on. Very few stop and ask. This teaches them something else. Explanations were often more for them than for others. The pattern reveals a quiet truth. They were trying to manage how they were seen. Now they release that effort. Not fully, but enough. They allow misunderstanding to exist. It does not feel like loss. It feels like relief. The pattern continues because it is rewarded. Less tension. Less back and forth. More space. Some people become aware of how silence changes their posture. Their breathing. They feel less pulled outward. Their inner world becomes less crowded. They notice fewer justifications forming in their mind. This creates a sense of stillness. The pattern is quiet, but it is strong. It reshapes how they move through conversations. They no longer rush to be clear. They let moments be incomplete. And slowly, this incompleteness becomes familiar, almost comfortable. At some point, the shift becomes visible. Not to others, but to them. It arrives without ceremony. In the middle of an ordinary moment. A conversation moves along. Someone waits for an answer. The space opens. And instead of stepping into it, they notice something. There is no urge. Not resistance. Not hesitation. Just an absence. The need to explain is gone. This realization is quiet. Almost easy to miss. Nothing dramatic happens. No feeling rushes in. The moment passes as usual. But something has changed. They sense it later. In the stillness afterward. Explaining once felt like a bridge. A way to reach others. Now, the bridge feels unnecessary. They understand that the effort was not about clarity. It was about connection. And that connection did not always arrive. The cost becomes clear in hindsight. Energy spent. Attention stretched. Time used to shape words carefully. They see how often they explain themselves to be safe. To avoid friction. To smooth edges. Now, they see that safety came at a price. A quiet one. They were giving pieces of themselves away. Small pieces. Over time, those pieces added up. This realization does not hurt. It settles. They notice something missing. Not in the room. Inside. The habit of offering. The openness. Explaining had been a way of saying, "This is who I am." Without it, something feels distant. They recognize the loss. Without naming it. It is not regret. It is awareness. They see how silence simplified their life. But also narrowed it. Fewer misunderstandings. Fewer connections. The balance becomes visible. This is the turning point. Not because they change direction, but because they see the path clearly. They understand that choosing not to explain was not neutral. It shaped how others met them. It shaped how they were known. The realization is gentle. They are not pulled to go back. They are not pushed forward. They simply stand in this knowledge. They see the quiet trade they made. Peace for distance. Control for less intimacy. Nothing feels wrong. But nothing feels complete either. They sit with that. They accept that some closeness was lost without a sound. They notice that explaining was a form of risk. Silence removed that risk. But it also removed possibility. This is not framed as a mistake. It is just a fact. The strongest moment is still. No reaction follows. They do not resolve it. They do not promise change. They simply carry this understanding forward. The inner turn is complete. After the shift, things continue. Nothing stops. Nothing resets. Some people notice the changes slowly. Not as events. As conditions. Inside, there is more space. Less tension. Fewer inner conversations running at once. They are not preparing responses ahead of time, not shaping explanations before they are needed. The mind feels lighter. Silence becomes a resting place. They move through conversations with less effort. They say what is necessary. They leave the rest untouched. This creates a calm rhythm. At the same time, something else appears. A distance. Not sharp, not painful, just a subtle gap. Some people notice they are asked fewer follow-up questions. Others do not lean in as much. Interactions become smoother, but also thinner. The world reacts by adjusting. People fill in the missing details themselves. They assume. They decide. Some assumptions are close. Some are not. But few are corrected. This shapes how they are seen. They become easier to categorize. Simpler from the outside. They notice this without judgment. Inside, there is no urge to clarify. The trade continues quietly. They feel less exposed, less pulled into long exchanges. This brings relief. But it also brings a quieter form of solitude. Not loneliness, just fewer entry points. Some people stop being the one others come to for context, for explanations. They become less central in shared stories. Life still includes them, but at a slight distance. They notice they are less entangled. This has its comfort. There are fewer misunderstandings to manage, fewer repairs to make. At the same time, fewer moments of being deeply known. The consequences are not dramatic. They are cumulative. Small moments where something could have connected, but didn't. These moments pass without resistance. The calm holds. Some people notice their inner world becoming quieter, but also less shared. Thoughts stay private. Reactions stay internal. This creates a strong sense of self-containment. They rely less on external validation, not as a goal, as a side effect. The world does not push back. It adapts. Conversations shorten. Expectations lower. They are seen as steady, reserved. This image forms without effort. They carry it easily. The consequence is balance. Less friction. Less closeness. Neither feels like a loss on its own. Together, they define a new way of being. Quiet, stable, contained, and still unresolved. In the end, there is no ending. Only a continuation. Some people move forward without explaining. Not as a statement. As a habit. They enter rooms and take their place. They listen. They observe. Their silence does not ask for space. It simply exists. Time moves around it. They are not hiding anything. They are not offering anything either. Moments arrive. Moments pass. A look is exchanged. A pause settles. The world does not stop to ask what it means. Some people notice how rarely they feel the urge to be clear now. How unfamiliar that urge has become. The desire to be understood feels distant. Not gone. Just quieter. They carry themselves without commentary. This changes how moments land. A comment that once would have opened a long explanation now closes quickly. A misunderstanding remains untouched. Life continues without correction. They notice how silence becomes part of their presence. Not heavy. Not empty. Just there. Others respond to what is visible. What is said. Everything else stays unmarked. There is no conclusion drawn from this. No meaning assigned. Some people sense that their inner world remains full, even if it is no longer shared. Thoughts still form. Feelings still move. They are simply held closer. The open ending lives in this holding. A life where less is offered and less is asked for. The balance stays delicate. At any moment, words could return. At any moment, silence could deepen. Nothing is decided. The path remains open. Some people continue this way, not because they chose it once, but because they keep choosing it without noticing. Each quiet moment reinforces the next. The story does not close. It lingers.